Well, we are talking to the captain, and I guess it was the captain, Dean, of the Protea carp angling team that took part in the World Championships in Croatia. You just returned, and we are on our way to the World Champs in Hungary. So we sort of pass each other.
No, absolutely, absolutely, Werner. And I'm sure you guys are pretty excited. For us, it's nice to be home. It's always tough being away like that, and representing your country is always such an honor. But yeah, I'd look forward to you guys also posting some good results and keeping us up to date whilst you're out of the country.
Dean, the Protea carp team, of which you were part for a long time, has had some excellent results in the past, and there was a streak where they were really on top of the world. And then there was a little bit of a slowdown, and you guys have gone back to drawing board, and you've done a couple of things, and you went over to Croatia, and you did a lot of good things. What about the results? Are you happy? What is in your head about returning from that trip?
Yeah, so Werner, I think first and foremost, let me start by saying it's always an honor and a privilege to represent the country, be it behind the rods or be it behind the team. So if I start out with that, the disappointment, am I disappointed? Coming from personally being involved in 4 world championships where we took the gold medal, and also one where we took a bronze in a fifth, and having done 10 world championships where I've seen it grown from 15 countries participating to where we're now heading to 40 countries. The dynamics of the championship has changed significantly, and I don't think our average viewers actually know that. And the dynamic change and the shift in the venues and how the system works has been quite substantial. So how do I feel about the result? Well, first and foremost, there was 30 countries that participated this year. And, there was actually a stage in the tournament where South Africa was 30th. All right, and we can speak a little bit more around that in a moment. And we made a couple of strategic changes during the event, and we clawed our way back up to 22nd. But having said that, in sectors, we had a 4th place in Sector A, and I'll speak to that a bit. We had a 12th place and a 13th place in sectors B and C. So, I want to say, I'm going to remind us, South African carp anglers can compete with the world's best. There's no doubt about it. We've shown it before. The techniques, the technology has changed a lot. However, I think one of the things that's been setting us back is the inability to go and practice. So everyone where we featured in the medals, we practiced the venue prior to the time and went back and could compete because we had practiced the venue. A large majority of the more recent ones.
Sorry, so it's all about information. Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, we do research before we go. And if you want to talk about that, I can share with you a little bit, what that's about. You build up networks over the years, which you also lean on and use. And then once you get there, there's that inherent knowledge that the anglers have, where people can start to synthesize what does the venue look like, what's the watercolor like, what's happening to the weather patterns, where are the fish visually, those type of things, and then they tweak it whilst we're at the water.
Okay, so from a general viewer's point of view that would like to go and fish different venues and at a competitive level, because we've got many of the carp anglers that are going to World Carp Classics and the Balloton Cup and all those type of things. And more of our South African carp anglers are actually moving in that way. We've actually got one of the first legs of the Balloton Cup qualifiers happening at the moment. And we are talking to them as well a little bit later. So seeing that, what is the mindset that the South African angler must have when they think about international venues? Is there a 5-point plan that anybody can follow to get the best results and to at least enjoy the fishing?
Yeah, look, I'm not sure I'm going to depict it as a 5 point plan, but history has shown us, and I know in our facet, we've won the most gold medals in terms of international angling. But history has proven to us that definitely research and research in many domains. So, if I'm speaking just to the average viewer, you're heading off to a offshore country. You're going to go and target a specific venue, be it privately or be it competitively. So, you've got the venue defined for you. So, start your homework. And what does that mean? Nowadays, I love to use Google Earth, and I love to use history on Google Earth. So I can dial backwards and forwards on that specific venue and look for different water levels in that specific venue. Google Earth then also gives you the ability to measure distances, and it also gives you the ability to map, so different water levels. We used that very successfully when we still used to go and do recce's prior to a world championship, that we would be able to match the data on Google Earth to data on the ground at the venue just before the tournament, and where you could physically measure off stuff. You could see structure underwater. You could see where channels were in the water. So there's a whole host of learning that you can put together before you go just by going to Google Earth. I think the second thing that's important is nowadays with all the various social media platforms, YouTube is one of the issues that we use. And often when you pick in a venue, or going to go compete at a venue, and you go and search on YouTube as your first source, you'll find quite good coverage on the venue around fishing. And then you can digest that, you can work your way through that. I think where a lot of people make a mistake in that is they watching it from the perspective of, are the guys catching fish, as opposed to watching it in detail. And what I mean by in detail, we will stop and analyze frames in the videos. And what I mean by analyze the frames, we will analyze what is the length of the rig, the size of the rig, the size of the weight, the hooks, the bait presentation. What are they, you see them standing spomming, and we will analyze the time that the thing flies in the air to give us then a general indication of the distances, that they're fishing. By way of example, if they're using zigs, we will use a typical rod length of 4 meters on a video footage to ascertain what is the length of the zig. So there's a difference between just watching, the footage like chewing gum, it's nice colors and pictures and people are catching fish, versus when you're going with the global approach and you're doing research on the footage. So I'm sure you can appreciate that, Vanna, but I think most viewers don't.
So what are the things that you've learned about the venue that you went to? And I know there were two venues, but what in general did you have in your mind before you went there in terms of an approach? Just maybe a few pointers.
Okay. So first and foremost, me coming into the captaincy of the role was rather unexpected and rather late. But nonetheless, just for the general viewers, was the World Championships was supposed to be hosted in the USA. And the net result of that was a large number of the countries boycotted it and said they couldn't go to the US because it's too expensive. So you must remember the World Championships is normally all your European countries, with the odd outliers of the US that attends, and then a couple countries from Africa. But predominantly it's European-based countries. So anyone from a logistics point of view who's got to move halfway across the world, it becomes more expensive and more difficult to go and compete. Like South Africa. Exactly, like South Africa. It's very different to climbing on a plane like a football player or rugby player or tennis player, where the amount of kit that you take is very limited. A tennis ball is a tennis ball, a golf ball is a golf ball, a rugby ball is a rugby ball. But with respect to us, you've got to take all the various baits, dips, rigs. It's just, a huge, huge task. But I know I'm speaking to the converted, because you know exactly what I'm referring to. But going back to what did we learn about this venue? There wasn't too much to learn about this venue. So I mentioned up front that the dynamics in the World Championships has become such that it's become too big. Okay, so what analogy could I use with that? So say, for example, FIFA, and they want to have a World Cup for FIFA. They go through a limiting process where they reduce the number of countries to make it to a manageable event that can be done. At this point in time, there is no limiting process in FIPSED with
Growing.
respect. So it's just growing and growing and growing. So by default, you're running out of soccer stadiums, okay, or you're running out of rugby pitches. You're running out of venues that can accommodate the size that the sport has grown to. So, okay, why is that a problem? The amount of line pressure that is put on the water, the physical distance between pegs has become reduced. You physically land up now at venues where people are fishing directly at each other, where they even halving the venue and limiting on distances you can cast, because they're thrown towards each other. So there's a whole host of things that have shifted in the world since, if I go back to the early 2000s when South Africa started to compete in FIPS carp angling. So on this venue in particular, what they had to do was they literally split the venue. So they literally took us to two different lake systems, water systems. The one was a fishery, and it's called Sandor. And when I say it's a fishery, it's like a little rectangular dam, and we fished on every single side of the dam. And the dam is probably 500 meters wide and probably 600 meters long. So
A lot of lines in one place.
you can imagine the line pressure on that water. And then to make it even worse is the dam is 1.5 meters deep, okay, and has various points, very few of that went up to 2 meters deep. So in the research that we did on that, we could see exactly where the water courses were within the dam, where the structure was in the dam, where the shallower water was, the deeper water was, but you don't know where you're going to sit. Mm. And the very few countries that did well in Sandor were the ones that were in the 2-meter water, and only those few pegs that were in the 2-meter water. You can imagine the pressure on a venue like that, what happens to the fish, irrespective of the weather pattern that changed significantly. We were all impacted by that. We took thunderstorms there that damaged countries' camps, and they were even thinking about stopping the tournament, and it was quite rough. And you can think that a shallow water body is very negatively impacted by huge thunderstorms and electrical storms. So that was the one lake, that was Sandor. The other lake was Lapovac that we fished. Totally different lake. 6.5 meters deep on average, and not a fishery, a natural dam versus a man-made dam. And, some of the footage I shared with the people back home, it was pristine. It's like one of those dream venues you want to go and fish. But even in the dynamics of that dam, it's very different. So where pegs at Sandor were sitting literally 20 meters apart, at Lapovac they were up to 100 meters apart. So you can just imagine the line pressure is so different, the water depth is so different. And Lapovac actually also produced some very good fishing, not what they anticipated. With respect to they expected like a 600 kilo winning bag from Lapovac, and with the weather front that moved through, they barely even got to 180 kilos on the venue. Yeah.
So what I want to get to is, in terms of all your research and everything that you knew about it and the preparation that you did and arrived, what were the changes that you had to make in situ that was the most significant?
Okay, so I just mentioned two sort of platforms of research. The third one I hadn't discussed yet was our networks. So over the years, you build up networks with various other countries, and it is the way it is. Friendships become solid once you fish 2 or 3 or 4 world championships with people, and they do share information. Okay, so that may come as a surprise to most, but that's the way professional sport works.
Yeah, they do.
So we had with various suppliers of products, and with various anglers that we've met along the journey, who are local or resident to the country or who are close enough to fish the venues. We got a bit of a steer on some of the information, which helped guide us on buying the stuff that we needed to buy offshore, which we procured before the time. Once you get there, when you've had the ability to practice like we always used to do. Now, I just remind people, I don't know if many people can remember that, by way of example, the rand to the euro used to be like 11, 12, and we would go and practice. Remember, it's Europe, right? So it's euros. Whilst we were out the country now, the rand was strong and it was 20 to the euro. I know at the moment, I think it's just marginally below 20. And when you're not financially sponsored, it becomes exceptionally difficult for the angler or the participant to A, get time off work, because remember, it's not a professional sport in South Africa, and B, to finance 2 trips there and back, with all the accommodation, the bait, and everything else that goes with that. So I think had we practiced like we've done in the past on events where we won, I think we would have been in a better position. So why am I saying that? Because you've got all of the basic package together in terms of the research that you formulated before you go, but you've still got to go execute. And it's in the execution of that where you've got to make the fine twitches, to some of the issues to make sure how it can work. So by way of example, Sandor, as I've mentioned to you, is a very, very shallow water body, and they put markers on each and every swim. They put markers, buoys, out at 200 meters.
Directional buoys, so that you know where's your swim.
Correct. So especially, when you're fishing so closely to each other, the regulations have changed where you used to have a 20-meter wide camp. They've now narrowed that down to 15 meters wide because they're getting tighter and tighter and tighter. So we call it a swim, all right, but it's actually a swim lane. So you've got directional tapes on the side, and that sort of goes out your 200 meters in front of you. And people who think they can cast and people who think they can cast accurately, well, I challenge you to start doing that at 200 meters, because the margin for error is so small. The further you start going out, the slight deviation becomes magnified the further it goes out.
And with the way,
exactly. And with the way the rules work is if you cast out of your lane, first warning. If you cast out of your lane again, you get a yellow card. If you cast out of your lane a third time, you DQ'd. And you must also remember that a yellow card carries with your country for 3 years. If a country gets any 2 yellow cards within a 3-year period, it's a DQ. Okay, so these are, they might sound like finite rules, but if you can imagine at the Olympics, you're running a 100-meter dash, the guy can't run across his lane. He's got to stay in his lane. If he does, he's DQ'd, end of story. And so why is that relevant? What we realized as the program progressed, as the hours started clocking by. So I'll use our B sector. Huckham and Color were in the B sector, and Huckham in particular had been training to cast at extreme ranges for a long period of time before we went. And we got a venue out at the Nile where we, go and we train, and it's got markers and it's official and it's lanes and it's, people probably think, you just learn how to fish. There's a lot more to it than that. And Huckham and Color were off the mark immediately in the B sector. But the problem was they were catching undersized fish. Now, first and foremost, in a venue for a world championships, the fish have to be over 1.5 kilograms and should average at least 3. Okay. Now I'm telling you, they were catching fish under 1.5 kilos. So it's frustrating. I think on the first day they had 9. And after 9 fish, the rest of the world doesn't see it. The rest of the world sees the scoreboard, and they see a 0 on the scoreboard. But without a doubt, they were catching fish. So then you can say, well, what was wrong? The only thing we were getting wrong was the distance,
Mm.
but we didn't know that yet. Okay, so you say, okay, well, but what distance? Well, they were fishing at 160 meters, and on your average angler, it's a fair way. What we did realize in the sand ore sector was myself and the team that works with me. This year, I decided to take stopwatches with. So in the past, when you try and ascertain the distance that someone's casting, you count. Okay, we used to count. That's how we used to do it. But the problem is if I'm ascertaining the distance for myself, which is fine. In other words, I'm counting somebody, and then I, as an angler, am going to cast. Then I count myself. So I'm my own benchmark, right? But when I come from another swim where, say, England is catching fish or Croatia's catching fish, and I come to you and I tell you it's 42 counts, how do you know what 42 counts is? When I say you can count to 40.
Finite.
Exactly. So that's what I did this year. So I gave the guys part of the data capturing that the team was doing for me during the tournament. There was a list of things. So when they were sitting doing recons for our team, they came back with a list of information, standardized, which we could share with everybody. And it's a very detailed list, by the way. It's not just when you have so far, and it's very detailed. What rig, what hook links, what baits, what colors, it's very, very detailed. So we started with.
Can we spend
Sorry.
some time? We're running out of time a little bit, but can we spend some time on the information? I want to really get to the place where what did you go with in your head? A couple of important factors, and what had you change? What did you have to change to, from an angling point of view? What was that shift that was required?
Oh, okay. So from a bait perspective, not much. Okay, what we went with, what was in our arsenal, what our research had shown us is actually what we caught the fish on. All right.
And
As I said,
what was that?
two very different lakes. I don't know if I'm allowed to talk about that, Van. It's your this is a public platform. So the next thing, someone else is going to go onto the internet and they're going to listen to this interview and they're going to say, oh, so that's what South Africa did.
Yeah, well,
Um,
okay, well, whatever you can share.
okay. So we knew prior to the time that we were going to do range fishing at range. And we knew prior to the time that the setup we were going to use, from what we had done our research on, was going to be a helicopter setup, a combi link setup, and a D rig on a combi link setup. Okay, so for those who understand our sport, they'll know what that is, right? We knew the colors. We didn't know the flavors, because that's the one thing when you're doing the research, you can see the combinations of what they're doing, but you don't know what the liquid is that they're using. So we did establish what the liquid was during the tournament, but you would have established that had you practiced. So it took us quite a couple of hours to work through a set of typical European liquids before we got what it was that we were looking for. So what did we change in sand ore? It was purely the distance. So okay, what does that mean? So we had gone in, we knew it was a fishery, we knew that we'd have to fish at range. From the research we had done, it looked like 160 meters. Okay. In principle, what we quickly worked out in the tournament, and that was the stopwatches that I was referring to, that it had to be between 6.8 and 7 seconds. Okay. Now, 6.8 and 7 seconds is about a 12-meter differential between those two. But what does that mean? That means when the person starts to cast and you actually see the rod start to load. Okay, so you're starting the pull through and the rod starts loading, you start the stopwatch. And you stop the stopwatch when the bait strikes the water. Okay, that gives you the flight time. All right. We didn't know what distance that was, but we knew what time that was. So it was a constant. And I then went into our sea sector on the second day they were still blanking. They'd also caught undersized fish, but still blanking. And I had a conversation with Lapis. Lapis being let's call it the range cast on the peg. So you try and have a range caster on each of your duos. And I said to him, look, Lapis, this is what we're going to have to do. I need you to get to 7 seconds. We stripped off on the peg, we stripped off the 10-pound line, we put the 7-pound line on. We stripped off the fluorocarbon leaders and put braided leaders on. Reason being, you want no stretch in the system and you want maximum flight distance. And in the tournament, we literally stood there and he just threw a weight and he just threw a weight and he just threw a weight until
And it
we
got
got
to
it to
7 seconds.
till we got to 7 seconds. All right. What we didn't know. So now you've got it. Okay. Now you know every cast you've got to try and hit that clip, irrespective of weather. And what we didn't know was what was the distance. So now you've got the 7 seconds. So you bring it back and you measure off the wraps, and then you've got the actual length. It was 192 meters.
Yes.
And I don't think people fully appreciate or understand when you are already fishing at your maximum range and you ask your Protea guys who are already competent above most others
Go
that
further.
you now need them to go to a place they've never been before. And you've got to help convince them that they can get there. And you've got to work with them in a tournament until they get there. And of course, once they get there, they got the result.
Yes.
So we got Lapis and Johan in on the second day. And then on the third day, because of the venue differentials, on the third day, I then went to, and you got limited time when you can go in. On the third day, I went to Kala and Hakam, and we had the same conversation. And stripped off down to 7-pound line, going till they got to 7 seconds. And once they got to 7 seconds, it was a matter of just time, and they were on the board and they kept coming with fish.
Is there anything else apart from the distance that you think made a big difference? And I've got a minute and 30 seconds for that. That made a real difference in terms of your variables.
Yes, there is, because in Lapovac Lake, they weren't fishing at range because they had the 6.5 meter water. They actually, Jordan and Vieille were fishing at 80 meters and 100 meters. So, I mean, that's, quite easy for anyone to do. And that's why I can say, yes, I think there was a difference. The bait, the hook combination we got from Jordan and Vieille.
Yeah.
Okay, because they on the first night they were on the scoreboard with nice big fish. So we brought the hook combination to Sandor. But in Sandor, because of the distance we had to go, we couldn't go with PVAs. So I then took a typical European liquid. We tried a few that I'd put down the lead core. So I'd let it run down the lead core and absorb into the lead core, let it hang for a while, that it absorbs into the lead core. That at least when we casted it at that range, you were introducing the scent into the area via the lead core. I then took that back to Vieille and Jordan, and that was the modification that they made on their last night. And I mean, you saw on their last night, they went from like 1 fish per night. I think they got 6, through the last evening. They unfortunately lost 2 of them, but they were catching massive fish. So yeah, that's working out a game plan on the move.
Yeah. Well, that's great performance. Then they really got onto it. So how did you conclude in terms of that principle? What is the biggest learning from that principle?
Okay, so the one thing I just need to share on that, right? So when you fish in these international events, you do a draw, and it's a grid system. And people won't know this, okay? And it's terrible when you're the captain and you know this and you can't share it with your team, right? But the way they do the grid, they rate the pegs green, yellow, and red. Okay, so they try and ensure that every country gets they call it a fair draw. In other words, green is a good peg, yellow is a okay peg, red is like a no-go peg, right? And Vieille and Jordan had a red peg. Okay, so why is this important? They came fourth on a red peg.
From a red peg.
They beat Croatia in their sector, and I remind everyone, Croatia was the world champions. Okay, so what I'm saying is the final game plan that we landed on too late, okay, in the tournament, working it out on the fly, said that even on a red peg, we could get a 4th place. So I take comfort out of that to say, actually, we got a plan, but we got it too late. All right. And the learnings I take from that is I think the practice is imperative. If I just cast my mind back as I started off when I said, everyone we won, we went and practiced. Everyone we finished in the medals, we went and practiced. Every single one. Everyone that South Africa has fallen out of the medals, there's no practice. And it's about affordability.
So looking at it, and that's one of the givens. So you can't practice, you can't practice. But what do you think if you, and I know hindsight is always perfect, but what do you think could you have done better to get to that plan quicker, apart from going to practice? What if you have to do it all over again, what would you do different?
I think there was one thing I missed. Now I'm speaking as a captain, right? I think there was one thing I missed in the beginning. And at the captain's meeting in the beginning, um, they told us that these boys had been put out at 200 meters. All right. And that was to control, where people can cast. You can imagine. So when I tell you, and I tell you, look, the boys have been put out at 200 meters, nobody's even worried about that. 200 meters is like it's far, right? Nobody's worried about it. And what I missed is one country asked in that meeting, can we cast past the boys? So in their mind, their game plan was already set to go to 200 meters. And I think that's where I missed it.
So the fact that it would be a casting game was quite important.
We knew it was going to be a casting game. Okay. But when you're talking 200 meters or 190 meters, you're now talking Olympic casting. You're not just talking, world championship style casting. I need to remind the viewers again, when South Africa was winning, all right, we were fishing with 5-pound line, all right? And on this methodology, we were fishing 105, 110 meters because our kit and our equipment hadn't evolved to be able to deal with that. We were using typical papgooi type stuff to try and do it. And we were winning at those ranges because European countries were fishing 30-pound line.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, European countries are fishing 5-pound line, 7-pound line, 10-pound line. The technology and the rod technology all changed. And I think I missed that. So, and not about Sandor, not about Lapovac. Lapovac, I still say they did exceptionally well on a red peg in that lake. Okay, and they beat the country that won. So I can't ask more from anybody in that regard. But in the Sandor Lake, I think we started with a 10-pound, and we should have started with a 7-pound. And I mean, literally those 20 or 30 meters throughout the tournament, the apps also indicated that the fishing was going to go from 67% down to 32, down to 10. So we knew it was going to get more difficult in the tournament. We knew the weather pattern was changing in the tournament. So that first day was actually vital in Sandor Lake. And when we were catching the 9 and 10 fish and the other people were like watching us catch the fish, I think that's probably where we lost it. Had we been catching the fish at the right distance, they would have been the right size. And I think that would have shifted our whole outcome. Yeah.
In conclusion, one or two things that any of our more social anglers that goes to these type of lakes, what type of advice can you give them?
So do all your research, but do yourself a favor when you get to that lake. Walk around it. So we, as the entire team, spent the best part of 6 hours walking around Lapovac, looking at every single swim, but that isn't what we were looking for. It's a public venue. It's heavily fished. And I actually shared a photograph with you, Werner, when we did our debrief post that day, where we packed out an entire array of stuff that we had found. And so what does that help you? It gave us the color schemes. It gave us the sizes. It gave us whether it was sinking, intermediate, or floating. And so as a social guy, if you plan in a trip and you're going to invest so much time and money, rather plan it in that you have a good day.
Yeah.
before you make your decision where you're going to sit on the lake and what are you finally going to do. Just walk around, talk to people, have a good look on what's lying on the ground for everybody to find.
Okay, so that local information is much more important than competitive information. Is what does the social guys do next to the dam? Because they've been fishing there for years.
Absolutely. And you must remember on the competitive platform, the pressure is extreme. Okay. And the fish feel the pressure. So when you go and do your own private outing, there won't be that pressure. So there's less line pressure, there's less food in the water. So you're more likely to have more fish available on your swim for you to catch. But if you're just in the right color regime, and you don't know the venue, even if you're just in the right color regime because you've walked around and you've picked up the stuff that the guys are fishing with, it's definitely a game changer. It was for us.
Well, Dean, thank you so much for sharing. And I think at the later stage, we'll talk again about a little bit more intriguing and more specific to the captaincy and so forth. So we are looking forward to that. Thank you for sharing.
Werner, my privilege and pleasure again to all the boys in the team. I just hail them. I think they did exceptionally well under very, very difficult circumstances. And to all the supporters back in South Africa, just thank you, thank you, thank you. It's amazing to be out there and see all those messages and stuff coming in and support. I do believe that the South African carp angling still has a great future. I do think that the dynamics of world championships are going to change. They might have to change it into different regions. So I'm looking forward to South Africa getting golds moving forward again. And then just lastly, Werner, with you and your teammates that are heading out, privately, I'll share the baits with you. So don't worry about it. But no, you guys must enjoy it. Thanks, Werner.
Thank you so much.